Welcome back. So today I want to talk about a little problem I have in my shop that I think I'm going to solve. So this is my workbench where I plane boards, I cut dovetails, I do all that sort of stuff. And right now I have the small lathe that I own sitting on top of it, so I can only use it for turning. The problem is every time I want to use my lathe, I have to pick it up off the floor, which I store over here, and carry it over and put it on the workbench. And then I can't use my workbench for anything else. And this thing is friggin' heavy. I don't know, it's probably 80 pounds easily. And so because of that, because it's such a hassle, I don't use it as often as I otherwise would, because I think turning is kind of fun. It's just, I need an easier way to do it. The other issue I have is you can't see it in this shot, but below the bench I usually use that, there's a shelf down there, and I use it to store jigs and other work holding devices. But the problem is like 80% of it right now is taken up with lathe tools. And that's not great either. So my plan is to solve both of those problems with my saw bench. So this is a small saw bench that was designed by Chris Schwarz, and it's put together with construction lumber and actually cut nails. And I've had this thing for, I don't know, 5 years or more, and it has been rock solid. It's inexpensive, and it's just kind of a joy to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build another one of these saw benches with longer legs, and I'm also going to try and come up with a way to help store the tools on the actual lathe stand. But the basic idea for it is going to be that same Chris Schwarz saw bench idea. So let's get started. This is a 2x10. This is going to be the top for my lathe stand, so the lathe will rest right here. I've measured the length of the lathe and plus a few extra inches of margin. That gives me about a 32-inch length that I need for the top. And then the width was just decided because this is roughly the width of the lathe. So a 2x10 should allow it to sit without any problems. Otherwise I would have used something a little narrower, but 2x10 should work fine. So 2x10, 32 inches in length. If you're doing this for yours, just measure your lathe and have it decide the dimensions of the top. But for me, this will work. So the legs of the lathe stand are just going to be 2x4s. This is the first one I've cut to length. It is 30 inches. I did a bunch of math. I used my high school trigonometry, hopefully I did it right, to figure out, because there's angles involved, the actual length of the legs needed. And it came out to be like about 28¼ inches. That's based on the size of my lathe and also my height, so basically the ideal working height of the lathe. So that will vary a lot depending on your lathe and your height. So don't use these, if you're building one of these, don't use this as an exact measurement. Figure it out for yourself. But basically I did the math. I need about 28¼ inches of length on each of the 4 legs, and so I made these about 30 inches because I'm going to have to cut off a little bit at the end to kind of level it out at the end. I'll show that when the time comes. So I need a little bit of extra space. So that seemed about the right dimensions. And then the other thing is, so this is just straight, 2x4 from the store. I'm going to square this up. I picked this face because it's the prettiest. I'm not going to touch this. This is going to be the outside face. I'm not going to touch this at all with a plane. I will square up the sides, and then the back side, you can see for this particular one is really rough. So I'm going to flatten this out, square it up, and that way I can make sure that the joinery will be easy because everything will be square and 90 degrees. But again, not touching the show face. Next up, we're going to mark out for the joinery. So the joinery for this, the trickiest part is the legs, but the dimensions are not going to change from the original design. Doesn't matter that the legs are going to be a little bit longer and the table or the top of it's going to be a little bit bigger. The joinery dimensions should be exactly the same as in the original design. So what we're going to do is the first step is, I don't know if you can see that in the shot. We're going to mark out a 1/2 inch line along the top of the leg, and this is based off of the reference face, which is the inside face, which is the one we planed down. Okay, so we're gonna put our marking gauge or cutting gauge, either one. Get that in the shot here. Okay, and then we're just gonna mark that line. And we're going to do that for all 4 legs. Okay, and then next we're going to mark another line with our gauge. This time it's going to be 1.5 inches in. Okay, so let's do that. So the next part is where the angles come in. So got to be kind of careful here. So basically, hopefully you can see these lines. I've marked them with a pencil. This is the cutting gauge lines that I just made. And now we're basically, that spells out a cheek that we're going to use to meet this leg up with the top. But we want it to be angled so the leg comes out like this. So in order to do that, we're going to angle these by 10 degrees. So basically 10 degrees off of 90. So they should kind of angle back that way. So you may have a regular bevel. I'm using this protractor kind of thing. So I've set it to 80 degrees. And then we're going to line that up with the line, the cutting line that we, or the cutting gauge line that we made before. And then we're gonna just strike a pencil line. Okay, so that's the first one. And then the second one, hopefully I get this right. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna line it up with the cutting gauge line that we just made. And then we're going to strike, oops, move the gauge a little bit. And we're going to strike a pencil line again. Okay, so it should look something like that. So it should be kind of angled this way. So if you can visualize it like that, that's what will make the leg kind of angle out from the top. Next up, we are going to cut the cheek of the first leg joint here. Let's see, hopefully I can do this with the camera here. So this is just like any cheek cut for a tenon, except it's angled, so just pay close attention as you're cutting so that you're crossing the lines. We're going to do this side and then we're going to rotate it and do the other side. Okay, now the cheek cuts are made, and I'm going to take a step before I do the shoulder cut, which is the cut down across grain here. So I'm gonna make a little shelf for the saw blade to ride in. That will make this cut more accurate, which is good because this is where the shoulder is what the top is going to rest on. So we want that very accurate. So I'm going to do basically I'm going to carve out a little V cut in the waist side. So that's the upper part here of this cut. We already have the line cut from our cutting gauge, but I'm going to pop out a little trench along this line so that the saw will just ride in it and make a really accurate cut. This is sometimes referred to as a first class saw cut. So hopefully you can see that. There's just a little shaving that's popping up there. So there's a little V-shaped shaving. Then we can kind of just pull that out. And now it's probably hard to see, but now there's a little V-shaped trough. And I just have two legs that are stacked on top of each other, so I can quickly do this operation in two legs at the same time. Choose a sharp chisel for this. Okay, now it's time to do the shoulder cut. So I have the leg here in my bench hook, just like I do pretty much all my cross cuts. And we're just going to rest the saw blade in that little ledge that we created, and then we're going to saw it, and we're going to keep a close watch and make sure we're not making a 90-degree cut, but we're doing an angled cut. Yeah, so let's do that. That's hard, but all right. There we go. Pretty good. Okay, now it's time to do the joinery on the top. And the way we're going to do that is I've knifed in a line. I used a pencil to darken it, so hopefully you can see it on the camera. But I knifed in a line that was 4.5 inches in from the end of the top, and I did that on both sides of the top. We're going to do this for all 4 legs. Okay, so I knifed in one line here, and then we're going to use the leg itself to knife in the other side of the joint. And what I've done is I've added a scrap 2x4 just to help me kind of support this at the right angle, because you need to have it raised up to basically meet the joint the way that it will when it's attached. And so we're going to line up the top of that leg with that knife, with the knife line I just made, and we can slide this 2x4 in and out to kind of get the joint flat. And then I'm just going to take my knife and I'm going to run it along the side of that wood a few times to knife in the other side of the joint. So now this joint is specific to the size of this leg, so I've marked the inside of the joint with a C. Use whatever marking you want, but I usually mark on the inside of the joint so it won't show, but that matches up, so I know this leg was marked for this joint. So later when I put it back together, or when I put it together, hopefully it should all fit. Okay, now that we've got both sides of that notch marked, we're going to mark the bottom of that notch. So I've got my cutting gauge again, and I've set it to 1/2 inch. That's going to be how deep our notch is, and I'm just going to run that along right here. so that we have the bottom marked. Okay, and then we'll do that front and back, or top and bottom, depending on what perspective we're talking about. Okay, now we're going to cut the sides of this notch. Okay, now the tricky part, we're going to try and cut the majority of the waste out with the coping saw. Okay, so lastly, now that we've got almost all the waste out of here, what we're going to do, and I've kind of already started doing this, is we're going to take our router plane and we're going to rest it on this, on the sides of the top here, and then we're going to use those guides, and we're going to set the blade to 1/2 inch deep, and we're going to use that to get the last little shavings out of here to make this thing dead flat. Once that's done, then, and actually it looks pretty good on this side, just got to keep going, but once that's done, this joint will be ready. I got the legs glued up, so I used hide glue. I kind of like it. Well, I already had it on hand, and I like it because it doesn't dry as quickly as like yellow wood glue. So you have a little bit longer to wrestle and assemble the parts before it dries. So I used hide glue, and then this is where where those cauls that we cut off when we were making the leg joints, we kept those, and basically these are at the perfect angle so that it makes it so that you can put a clamp across and it's clamping across 90 degrees instead of these weird angles. So basically I taped on these cauls temporarily with blue painter's tape, and then I got a second pair of hands because it's kind of a pain. Obviously this is upside down. Did I say that? Yeah. And I got a second pair of hands to help me hold the legs while I put the clamp on, and I did that for both ends, and now we just have to wait for it to dry. So next up, we're going to do the cross supports here between the two legs. So the bottom, or really the top of the stand, is down here resting on my bench. I just measured up. Basically, I eyeballed where these should go on the legs, and then I just measured up and made a mark from the top to the point where I had set them, and to make sure that all the legs are kind of in the same place and are more or less level. So, and then I've temporarily clamped them in place, and then we're going to mark where the leg meets the cross piece or cross support. We're going to mark that with a knife so that we can cut the joinery for this here shortly. Okay, so next up, we're going to mark the cheeks of the joint. So I've set my cutting gauge to 1/2 inch depth, and then we're just going to run a line around the sides to make the cheek marks. Oops, see that on camera. Here we go. Okay. All right. Now we've got everything marked out. I put the piece on my bench hook, and we're going to carefully cut the shoulder. This is kind of a weird cut because it's going to be at an angle, but take it slow. It'll work. All right, now we're going to make the cheek cut. And the only tricky thing here is that the base is tilted at an angle about like that. So it's going to be a little bit of a different tenon cut. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on this long brace. So this is actually my saw bench. This isn't the lathe stand we're working on, but we're going to do this piece next. Now, on the saw bench, we put the long brace on top of these short braces between the legs here. I'm going to actually reverse this and put the long brace underneath, so that I'll have kind of a ledge that I can maybe attach like a shelf to store, you know, lathe accessories or something like that. So I'm going to change it a little bit. So I've got the lathe stand upside down, and I have the long brace, or what will become the long brace, clamped in place. I mostly just eyeballed it, get it right in the middle and kind of even on both ends. And then what we're going to do is take our marking knife, and we're just going to run a line to mark where that intersects the short brace. We're going to do that on each side of each brace, so 4 marks total. Okay, so I've got the joint knifed out. The depth of the notch is about 1.25 inches, so that I marked that with my cutting gauge. The top lines are marked with the marking knife. Should be ready to go. So we're going to cross cut here and here, and there, and then we're going to come in with a coping saw and cut the waste out, and then finish it out with a chisel. Let's go. Okay, now we get to the fun part. So we're going to bang in a bunch of nails, basically. And the reason for that is these glue joints just really aren't sturdy enough. In fact, this one, probably my fault, but it's already like loosened up. It's not doing anything anymore. So what we're going to do is put nails through pretty much all these joints. So there's going to be 2 nails here, 2 nails up above in the short brace, and so let's see, how many is that? 18 nails total. But here's the thing, we are not going to use regular nails. We're going to use cut nails. So these are this is the way all nails used to be. And now I'm going to give you my sales pitch for why cut nails are awesome. Basically, these grip in the wood way better than wire nails. They're almost more like screws. And they basically wedge, because of their wedge-shaped shape here, they actually like wedge themselves into the wood and they won't come out. So they're really awesome. Now you might be asking, like, why
why doesn't everybody use cut nails since they're so cool? And the reason, well, there's a few reasons. One is they are more expensive. It used to be that these were made by blacksmiths, and so each of them was kind of handmade, so they were pretty expensive. Nowadays they have machines that'll make them, but they're still more expensive than those wire nails that you see at the big box stores or whatever. The second thing is they take a bit of skill to use. So you have to drill pilot holes for these. You have to. And basically you have to put them in the correct way. So one side you can see is kind of wedge shaped. And then if I turn it 90 degrees, it's just straight. So you have to align that with the wood grain. So basically the straight side should go aligned with the length of the grain. So basically what you don't want to have happen is, this is the wedge side. You don't want to have that lined up with the grain because it'll literally split the wood. So you have to have it sort of lined up perpendicular to the long grain. So if you do it wrong, you could split the wood, mess your project up. And they do take a bit more work because you do have to drill pilot holes. So that's why they aren't used as much, but I think they're great, especially for a project like this where you need like a lot of strength. So let's go ahead and drill pilot holes and put these nails in. Okay, so we're going to drill a stepped pilot hole. So we're first going to use an 1/8 inch bit that's going to go basically the full length of the cut nail. So if you can kind of see, so that's going to go all the way, in fact, yeah, all the way through the leg and into the top. And then when we're done with that, we're going to use a 3/16 bit to drill basically just through the leg, not into the top. And that'll give us a stepped hole where it's bigger at the beginning, which is kind of corresponds with the fat part of the wedge, and then gets narrower towards the end. Okay, so now it's time to drive the nail. So again, don't have the wedge across like the long grain like this. So this is the wedge. You want to turn it so the straight side is aligned with the grain. Or sorry, the straight side, yeah. Straight side is aligned with the grain. So basically, it's not going to split the wood this way. Okay, so you can see the nails already going in. This. Okay, here we go. Okay, I didn't bother to record this because it's so simple, but I basically put a simple shelf between the two short braces. It's actually made from a section of 1x10. I could have made it wider, but I don't really have that much stuff I want to store down here. I was also thinking about putting like a lip on the edge of it, but the things that I'm going to store here probably are not going to roll off. Or aren't likely to, and I was afraid a lip might actually just serve to catch shavings that would fall down from above. So I'm going to leave it just like this for now. If it doesn't work well, I've just attached it with 2 drywall screws. So it's easy to detach and put something else down here. Either a bigger shelf or maybe some kind of rack, tool rack, or I don't know. Alright, so the last major thing I'm going to do on this project is to make a tool rack. So basically I've spaced out all my lathe tools here, kind of how I want them in the tool rack, and figured out that, you know, I'll need roughly 2¼ inches, I think, is about the distance between each one of these. I also kind of played around with where it should be mounted on the lathe stand, and I think it'll work well to put it on one end of the lathe stand, so not the flat side where I'll be doing work, but kind of on across two of the legs, basically. You'll see that in a few minutes when I attach it. Okay, so I'm laying out the tool rack right here. So the tools or the tool rack's going to be attached like here and here to the short braces, and the tools will actually go through holes like down into the surface like this. So I've kind of just pulled out my Forstner bit set and I just kind of eyeballed it, and so I picked out for my particular tools an 1 1/8 Forstner bit. I think is going to be about right, because it's going to be, I don't know if you can see that very well there, but it's going to be wider than this ferrule, and but the kind of handle of the tool will rest on the hole right about there. So that'll make it so it's loose enough to pull the tools out easily, I think, but still hold them securely. So this will obviously depend a lot on your lathe tools, so but once I had that figured out, then I wanted the holes to be towards the front edge of the tool rack, like not right in the middle. And so I just kind of eyeballed that this was about the right place, which happens to be that the center of that hole should be about 1 inch from the front edge. So then I just drew a line 1 inch from the front edge of the tool rack. And then to space out the tools, I kind of already figured out that roughly 2¼ inches is about the right distance between the center of each hole. And I've also laid out where the center of the outside holes should be, so those are already marked. So then I just took my handy dividers and set them to be just a shade under 2¼ inches apart. And then now what we're going to do, in order to lay out where the holes should be, is we're just going to walk these dividers along, and everywhere they make a point, or everywhere they dig into the wood, is where I should drill a hole. So there's hole number 1, hole number 2, and then we're going to swing this over, hole number 3, walk it again, hole number 4, hole number 5, and then this should meet up, and it basically does, like right there on the last hole point. So that's how you use dividers to lay out something like this. Okay, let's drill some holes. So as I mentioned, I'm using an 1 1/8 Forstner bit. I'm going to use my drill press just because I have one. These holes are not don't need to be super accurate, so you can totally use a hand drill if you don't have a drill press, but I have a drill press, so I might as well use it, I guess. So here we go. Let's drill a bunch of holes. Nice. Okay, so I laid out the step here, and so I just kind of eyeballed this. It's about 1 1/8 ledge, I guess you could say, and then a vertical line, and then I also just found a circular thing. This is a cap to a little spray bottle, that I use to kind of make the little fillets, I guess those are called, or the curves. Actually, I'll probably do another one down here, just to make it a little more pleasing to the eye. So I did that on both sides, and I'll cut it out on the bandsaw. And here it is mounted to the side of the lathe stand. So yeah, just used some 3-inch drywall screws to screw that right into the leg. Easy peasy. Also, one note, maybe you can see here, I had to drill some like side wings on one of the holes, because what I found was for this skew chisel, the blade of it is quite a bit wider than the ferrule, and it would fit through the hole, but not comfortably, or not easily. So by putting some side wings on one of the holes, it goes in and out very easily. So easier to access that way. Other than that, everything seems to be working great. Okay, so next up we're gonna fix this problem. So you can see here, this is the bottom of one of the legs, and it doesn't meet the top of my bench here. It's kind of just touching on the back edge there, and that's fine. We can fix that. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to put this on a flat surface. Could be your bench, could be like a nice concrete floor of your garage or something like that, and then just take a scrap of wood and tape or glue a pencil to it, so that the tip of the pencil is above the lowest point, or the highest point of the leg. Anyway, basically so that it won't touch, or that it'll touch wood all the way around. And then you basically just draw a line like this around all the sides of the leg. And then once that's marked, we will saw that part off, and then it will meet the floor perfectly. Okay, so once you have those legs marked, just clamp your lathe stand down. You might even be able to put it in your bench vise. And then we're just going to take our joinery saw, and we're going to cut along on the lines. That's it. So all you have to do is remember to cut the lines that you can see. If you can't see the line, don't cut it. Change where you're standing and saw from a place where you can see the lines. It's a little tough with the camera, so hopefully I won't block the view here, but okay, for our last step, we're going to do some cosmetic stuff. So we're basically going to flush cut the tops of the legs that kind of are above the table level. We're going to flush cut off these, the short braces that go beyond the leg. Same for the tool rack, etc. Just to make everything look nice. This is pretty much cosmetic, except for the top. I guess you want the top completely flat, but the rest of it's cosmetic, but we might as well finish it up the right way. Okay, so we're going to use a flush cut saw like this to basically cut the top off like that. I like to put a little bit of blue painter's tape around the surrounding area, because inevitably the saw teeth kind of rub against it and can make some saw marks on there. So just, it's easy solution just to put some tape around there to protect it. That's pretty much it. Here we go.